Now I know everybody tells me to only do this once, but this is actually the second take because in the last time I taped this video, I accidentally said that the House of Representatives has 439 people, which was embarrassing. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about redistricting or gerrymandering. Every 10 years, the United States Department of Commerce takes part in something called the census, which is where they count up how many people are in the country. And they also figure out how many people are in each state. So after they do the census, they do something called reapportionment, which they figure out how many districts each state gets. And sometimes states will gain, like Texas just gained 4, Florida gained 2, Georgia gained 1, Washington gained 1, and sometimes they lose states. New York lost a few, Ohio's lost them, Michigan has lost them, but you always going to end up with 435. So if some are gaining, that means others have to lose. Now, once you figure out how many districts each state gets, then state legislatures will come through and they will draw congressional boundaries for each state. Now, oftentimes these state legislatures are very partisan, and they will draw districts to favor one party over another. And this is very complicated nowadays, but computer modeling and other factors have allowed state legislatures to do it with a lot of exactitude. That borders on perhaps being somewhat unethical at times, because instead of voters choosing their leaders, with gerrymandering, leaders can frankly choose their voters. It's a somewhat of a perversion of the democratic process, in my opinion, but it happens. Gerrymandering has happened since the 1800s. In Democratic states, they do it for Democratic candidates. In Republican states like Texas, they do it for Republican candidates. Now, there are limits to gerrymandering, two I'd like to talk about. The first one, in cases like Reynolds versus Sims and Baker versus Carr and Westbury versus Sanders, the Supreme Court has said no to malapportionment. In other words, each district has to have the same number of people within it. So you can't have 1 million people in one district and next door have 50,000. They all have to have roughly 710,000. The other thing they have limited is what we call minority-majority districts, which is where you draw a boundary to make sure that a minority candidate gets elected. And sometimes they are rather extreme. Here's one from Texas in the 1990s, and the Supreme Court has been very skeptical of this. Now, they've allowed some of them, but they have said that when race is the only consideration, it is unconstitutional because it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Again, this only happens in the House because in the Senate, no matter how big or small the state is, they get 2 senators. So I hope this has been helpful. See you next time.